Listen carefully. What you're about to hear was never meant for your ears. It was never meant for a courtroom. It was never meant for the world. It was whispered by a man who believed he was alone, a man who had spent 30 years and a fortune beyond comprehension, making sure that no one ever truly heard him. What the hell did I do? Killed them all, of course. 9 words, spoken to a bathroom mirror, picked up by a lapel microphone he forgot was still recording. That was Robert Durst, heir to a New York real estate dynasty worth billions, a man who stood inside courtrooms 3 times for the disappearance of his wife, the execution of his best friend, and the dismemberment of his neighbor, and walked away every single time, not because he was innocent, because he was rich. Today, on Arcane Dark History, we pull back the curtain on a man who wore the mask of eccentricity to hide the face of a monster, a man who bought silence, manipulated justice, and played cat and mouse with documentary filmmakers until the mic caught what 30 years of investigations couldn't. This is not just a crime story. This is a story about how power corrodes the soul, how privilege creates ghosts, and how, in the end, the one thing money cannot buy is the ability to shut up, stay until the end, because the final piece of this puzzle will make you question everything you think you know about justice in America. Robert Durst wasn't born broken, but he was born into a world where normal rules didn't apply. In 1950, when Robert was 7 years old, his mother Bernice fell from the roof of the family mansion in Scarsdale, New York. The official verdict, suicide. But Robert would carry a different memory for the rest of his life. He claimed his father, the cold, domineering Seymour Durst, led him to the window and made him watch. Whether true or fabricated, that story tells us everything about the man Robert became. A man who saw trauma as a currency. A man who learned early that death could be witnessed, not felt. In 1973, he married Kathleen McCormick, Kathy. She was warm, social, and utterly out of place in the marble fortress of the Durst family empire. Robert was obsessive, controlling. He monitored her schedule, her friendships, her ambitions. When Kathy decided to pursue a medical degree, Robert resented it. A wife with independence was a wife with escape routes. Friends who knew them in those years describe a man consumed by order. Robert cleaned compulsively. He organized food in his refrigerator by color. He couldn't sleep if a picture on the wall was slightly tilted. This wasn't quirky behavior. It was the external architecture of a man desperately trying to control a world that terrified him. On January 31st, 1982, Kathy appeared at a dinner party in Connecticut. Witnesses said she seemed frightened, agitated. She left early, telling friends she needed to confront Robert at their South Salem cottage. She was never seen again. Robert waited 5 full days before reporting her missing. His story shifted like sand. First he said he drove her to the train station. Then he said he spoke to her by phone when she arrived at their Manhattan apartment. But phone records? Silent. Witnesses? None. Any other husband would have been arrested within days, but Robert activated what investigators would later call the Durst Shield. Private investigators, high-priced attorneys, political connections. The NYPD, deeply entangled with the city's real estate establishment, treated the case as a domestic matter, another rich couple's messy separation. They didn't dig, they didn't push. They let the Durst money do its quiet, erosive work. Kathy was declared legally dead in 2017. Her body was never found, but in 2000, someone who knew the truth was about to speak, and Robert Durst knew it. Susan Berman had been Robert Durst's closest friend since their college days at UCLA in the 1960s. Their friendship was bound by secrets, and she was carrying the heaviest one. Susan's father had been a Las Vegas mobster, and she'd grown up in a world where silence was survival. Robert understood that world. They understood each other. What investigators would later discover, and what Robert certainly knew, was that Susan had provided him with a critical alibi for the weekend Kathy disappeared. She had lied for him, deliberately, for almost 2 decades. In late 2000, New York authorities reopened the Kathy Durst case. Detectives were finally circling, and Susan Berman, broke, desperate, and terrified, was on their list of people to interview. She never got the chance to talk. On Christmas Eve 2000, Susan Berman was found dead in her Los Angeles home. A single gunshot wound to the back of the head, execution style. Whoever did it had cleaned the scene meticulously. No forced entry, no fingerprints, no witnesses. The killer had anonymously alerted police with a handwritten note. The word Beverly was misspelled as Beverly. That tiny, almost invisible detail would become one of the most significant pieces of evidence in the entire case. A signature written in carelessness. For years, the misspelling sat quietly in an evidence folder. LAPD treated Susan's death as a botched robbery. Nobody looked hard at Robert Durst. Nobody looked hard at anyone, not yet, because that same year, Robert Durst, now being scrutinized from all sides, did something that only a man completely drunk on his own invincibility would do. He disappeared. He disguised himself as a mute woman, and he rented a room in a rundown boarding house in Galveston, Texas, under a fake name, next to a man named Morris Black. On September 28, 2001, the body of Morris Black began washing ashore in Galveston Bay, not all at once, in pieces, trash bags, carefully tied, distributed across the water to slow identification. The head was never found. Police quickly identified Morris Black as a 71-year-old transient who had lived in the same low-rent boarding house as a mute woman named Dorothy Sinner. When they ran Dorothy Sinner's background, they found something extraordinary. Dorothy Sinner was a real person, but she'd been dead for years. The name was borrowed from an old school acquaintance. Dorothy Sinner was Robert Durst, a billionaire in disguise, hiding in plain sight. He was arrested, but here is where the story departs from every logical trajectory it should have taken. Robert Durst, in court, admitted to dismembering Morris Black. He did not deny it. He said Black had come to his apartment. They fought, the gun went off, and Morris Black died. An accident, he claimed. And then, panicking, he had cleaned the apartment, cut the body into pieces with a bow saw, and dumped the remains into Galveston Bay. His defense team made a single devastating argument. Dismemberment is not a crime. It is disturbing. It is grotesque. But without proof of premeditated murder, cutting up a body is not by itself illegal in Texas. The jury deliberated for just 5 hours. Not guilty. Robert Durst walked out of that Galveston courthouse a free man. He had admitted to cutting a human being into pieces. He had been charged with murder, and the jury set him free. There is a specific kind of silence that follows a verdict like that, not the silence of relief, the silence of incomprehension. If Robert Durst felt anything standing on those courthouse steps, it was confirmation. The confirmation of a man who had always suspected he existed on a different plane of consequence than everyone else. He was untouchable, or so he believed. In 2010, director Andrew Jarecki had made a film called All Good Things, a fictional drama loosely based on the Robert Durst story. Durst, in a move that stunned everyone who knew anything about his past, reached out to Jarecki personally. He wanted to tell his side. This was not the behavior of a guilty man trying to avoid scrutiny. This was the behavior of a man who had beaten the system so many times that he had become genuinely arrogant about it. Robert Durst sat down for hours of filmed interviews. He was relaxed, reflective, even charming at moments. A man performing innocence so long he'd almost convinced himself. The six-part HBO documentary series, The Jinx, The Life and Deaths of Robert Durst, premiered in February 2015. It was an immediate cultural earthquake. Audiences were mesmerized, journalists were taking notes, and prosecutors across multiple states were watching very, very closely. During production, the filmmakers made a discovery that no law enforcement agency had connected in 15 years. Robert Durst had written Susan Berman personal letters throughout their friendship, notes sent to her home address. The filmmakers compared the handwriting and spelling in those letters to the anonymous tip sent to Beverly Hills police, reporting Susan's body. The word Beverly in Durst's personal letters, the same misspelling, the same block print capital letters, the same distinctive hand. The man who had reported Susan's body to the police had written the letter with the same hand he used to write her birthday cards. Jarecki confronted Durst on camera in the final interview. He placed both letters on the table. Side by side, the camera stayed on Durst's face. For the first time in 30 years, the mask slipped. "I don't know," he said quietly. "I'm a little confused." Then he excused himself. He stood up. He walked to the bathroom. He still had the lapel microphone attached to his shirt. Robert Durst believed the interview was over. He believed the cameras were off. He believed the microphone around his chest was dead. He believed he was alone in that bathroom with his reflection and his thoughts. He was wrong. What the audio captured in the next 60 seconds is one of the most astonishing, unscripted moments in the history of documentary filmmaking. Robert Durst, 71 years old, standing over a bathroom sink, began speaking out loud to himself. Not to the filmmakers, not to a lawyer, to no one, to everyone. "There it is. You're caught. You're right, of course, but you can't imagine. Arrest him. What the hell did I do? Killed them all, of course. Them all, not him, all of them. Kathy, Susan, Morris, and whatever else he was carrying alone in the dark corridors of that mansion-sized mind." This was the moment. Not an investigation that spanned 3 decades, not forensic evidence or witness testimony. The thing that brought Robert Durst down was the oldest trap in human history, the inability to sit quietly with what you've done. The morning of March 14th, 2015, one day before the final episode of The Jinx was set to air, the episode containing the bathroom audio, Los Angeles prosecutors arrested Robert Durst in a New Orleans hotel room. He had been preparing to run $117,000 in cash, a fake ID marijuana, and a latex mask. He was charged with the first-degree murder of Susan Berman. The trial, delayed by the COVID-19 pandemic, finally began in Los Angeles in 2021. Prosecutors argued that Durst had killed Susan not in a panic, but with deliberation, to prevent her from cooperating with investigators who were reopening the Kathy Durst case. She was not just his oldest friend. She was his most dangerous liability. On September 17, 2021, after one of the longest and most complex trials in Los Angeles history, the jury returned its verdict. Guilty, first-degree murder, life in prison without the possibility of parole. Robert Durst died on January 10, 2022, in a California prison. He was 78 years old. He died without ever standing trial for Kathy. He died before investigators could formally close every thread. Here is what this story is really about. It is not about a brilliant criminal who outsmarted the system. Robert Durst was not brilliant. He was privileged. There is a profound difference. Brilliant criminals plan. Privileged ones simply don't get caught because the mechanisms designed to catch them have been quietly dismantled by money, by access, by 1,000 small corruptions that nobody ever names out loud. Kathy Durst disappeared in 1982. She was not rich. She had no shield. She had a husband who knew how to make things vanish, and a system that had no interest in looking. Susan Berman was silenced mid-sentence, a woman who knew too much and trusted too deeply. Morris Black was dismembered and scattered across a bay. His head was never recovered, and Robert Durst spent 30 years inside the armor of his family's wealth, walking through courtrooms like a man visiting a museum, a curious observer in a world of rules that were never truly meant for him. Until a filmmaker put a microphone on his lapel, and the armor developed one small crack. That's all it took. After 30 years of lawyers and private investigators and police departments looking the other way, an accidentally left-on microphone did what no court ever managed. The masks we wear to face the world are never as strong as we believe. Power doesn't make you untouchable. It just delays the moment when you forget who's watching. Robert Durst forgot. We didn't